Welcome to Broadcast Astrology, Insight for Humans.
This is Lisa Pesnichek.
And I'm Sarah Beckner, and we're here to deep dive into the fascinating world of astrology.
We offer blind chart readings, interviews with notable guests, and much more.
So keep listening as we bring you Insight for Humans. Welcome to Broadcast Astrology, Insight for Humans. I'm Sarah Beckner, sitting here with Lisa Pesnichek and Dulce Bell-Bulley. And I'm so excited to be here today and to have a conversation with Dulce about the great Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's occurring next year. And I didn't realize it, Dulce, when Lisa and I have been at this for a couple years. This is probably episode 26 or so, right, Lisa? And I have wanted you on since the very beginning. And I don't know why, what the impulse was this month to call you and just do it. And then you've told me that you have a natal Saturn-Neptune aspect in your chart. So there's a little bit of synchronicity with that. And we astrologers always tend to, there's an inverse relationship between how infrequently something occurs in the sky and how excited we astrologers get about these things. And so these conjunctions only occur roughly every 36 years or so. But the last time we've seen a conjunction in the sign of Aries has been ages and ages ago. So there's a lot happening right now. I look forward to diving into the conversation. Dulce is for me, the OG astrologer, my original inspiration. And I can't even remember, Dulce, when my first reading with you was, but it has to be nearing 2 decades ago or something like that. So you have a thriving practice. I'd love to hear a little bit about where you're at now, what you're doing, and just welcome you to the conversation. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. How fun to be with you two star ladies. Well, I have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that we're talking about today is on my 28-degree Pisces rising. And it's been that way since May of this year, 2025, and it will continue until February of 26. So I'm very familiar in a very personal way with how this is working out. So I had for 20 years, I think, a very busy astrological practice. I'm also a psychotherapist and a hypnotherapist and a radical living coach with Colin Tipping's work on radical forgiveness. But since the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on the ascendant, my life has morphed quite, I was going to say dramatically, but it's sort of in a Saturn-Neptune way. It's drama. So I do a lot of dancing now. I dance for peace with the Sufis. So I spend a lot of time camping and dancing. And also my spiritual practice has become, it's so important to me, the elevation of spirit. And also really enjoying my work in hypnotherapy, recognizing the power of the unconscious. So that's how it has shown up. And also I've had a book, one of my many books published, and I'm putting it on Audible. And I'm writing the second one in the series. So I found it. In fact, Liz Green, when we go to talking about this specificity of the conjunction itself, Liz Green, I completely recommend her work. Of course, I mean, this is a weighty tome. It's like 700 pages of Neptune. But it's very, very good in many, many ways. And she specifically refers to Neptune and Saturn about being the sort of the juice of the artistic process, art. So, but we can talk more about that.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, thank you for being here, Dulce. I've heard about you for years from Sarah, and it's just an honor to have you here with us today. And as everybody has kind of noted already, we're here to talk about Saturn and Neptune, which we will start to work our way into. I think that globally, we've really felt into the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's forming together. They've been going back and forth, Saturn and Neptune, between the end of Pisces as Dulce stated, like around 27, 28 degrees, and then back into Aries, which is a really threshold part of the zodiac in general, which I think Sarah and I have spoken to many times in this past year, where earlier this year we had the Mercury and Venus retrograde going back and forth over this threshold, as well as eclipses taking place as well. So we've got a lot of change happening. And I think that's like really, when we look at astrology, we look at all of the the corroboration. Where is everything pointing to that's very similar? And what the Pisces Aries part of our chart has in common is that something is ending, that a cycle is being completed. And I think that Saturn, Neptune coming together, especially on this threshold part of the zodiac, holds this similar theme where everything we've known, the things that we've depended on, the timelines, the rules, the guidelines, is being disintegrated and put into new form that we can't identify yet, which can be very disorienting, just as thresholds are. We're very much in a liminal space. And I think that's very Neptunian. But when we put that into a world of Saturn, which has form and it's the form and tangibility, we're kind of shown the ways that that's not working anymore. So we will go further into this, but I just kind of wanted to set us up in what I suspect will largely be part of that framework. But this summer in 2025, we really felt this, especially in July and August when Saturn and Neptune were within 30 minutes of one another, so less than a degree. And we really felt a lot of that happening in our world. And especially if you had any planets or placements around or at late Pisces or early Aries, a lot of those people are feeling that as well. But we're going to have these two planets, Saturn and Neptune, finally actually meet up at 0 degrees on Aries on February 20th, 2026. And so definitely put February and even February and March on your calendars as far as being times to kind of make a lean schedule and leave some time for things to be a little bit off, because I think the world and our lives are going to move a little deeper into what we've already been experiencing. So anyways, we will jump in from here. Dulce, do you want to take it from here as far as what we're here to speak to?
Yeah, I love what you were saying there. If we look at Saturn, it is time. It's a personal planet. It's the furthest we can see with the naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
So for millennia, as long as we've had humans on Earth and we could see Saturn, it was the definition of our reality. And then, of course, now we have this transpersonal influence beyond the personal life that's with the personal life. And what you were saying about the disintegration, the erosion of, we can look at Saturn as karma, as, actually Edgar Cayce said something very interesting about Saturn. He said that Saturn is where all insufficient matter is cast for its remolding. So that Saturn is where we sort of have this karma, these obligations. It's also it's this mortal coil. It's my DNA. It's the inheritance in my bones, teeth, skin, and structure. There's this. Now we have Neptune, which is the field of pure potential beyond reality. So we can see this, for example, in our world right now. What is, we've got a lot of people who were on TV shows that are now running things, Neptunian. So it's all very illusory with government, Saturn. In my own life with Saturn in this position, I had two beings in my life that are over 100 years old. Sadly, that I care for these beings. One of them is my little old wiener dog. And the other is my late husband's aunt. She's 103 in December, and my little dog is 105. And so here we have Neptune. What comes beyond death? What is this field? And you also said something, Lisa, about we don't know what it's going to be. That ineffable ephemeralness of Neptune, we just don't know. But my feeling on this, especially as I've been working with it, is that whatever the karmic intent, and it doesn't mean that karma is a bad thing. I mean, there's a school of thought that says that karma is necessary to shape the spiritual journey. So it's not like, oh, got karma. It's like it's shaping my spiritual journey. Neptune is the spiritual journey. So this sort of working with what is my past, what is the elements of my life that have made me, that I can then surrender, Neptune, offer up in forgiveness, Neptune. So this mysteriousness of this aspect can be relative to the personal by saying, okay, these are the things I've struggled with or dealt with. And then here is this hand of grace, Neptune, grace, falling unseen rain to dissolve and love and to create. So it's very, very beautiful, but there's also such a lot of crapola.
I mean, we know anytime we're talking in a symbolic language, it is multivalent, and there are so many ways it can express itself in the physical. But I think at the crux of it is, like you're both saying, it's really that threshold between what is liminal and what is material and concrete. And I think that's just going to show up in so many ways. And you opened with it, Dulce, too, even talking about taking your spiritual practice into the realm of dance and ritual. It might be a potent time for us to take our spiritual practices out of the headspace and make them real, ritualize things in our life to help pull on that thread from those liminal spaces, from the ideal, from the visionary into our affairs on earth. Like ritual is a very potent tool for that. I wanted to share with you guys today, because when I start thinking about astrology, everything starts jumping out at me. I'm sure that happens to both of you too.
And astrologers curse.
Yes. And I came across a book last week called Collective Illusions by Todd Rose. And I thought this was so Saturn-Neptune. He wrote this book about how it's the science of why we make bad decisions, essentially. And he posits this idea that we often act from a place of thinking we know what somebody else is thinking, even when it's not necessarily true. And we do it in large part to establish safety for ourselves, because we're such social organisms and we want some sense of group and community safety. But that the risk of doing this, and again, it happens both consciously and unconsciously, but the risk of doing it is that we become more polarized because things push to the extreme a little bit more. And we know that with media, with social media, with all the voices out there, that the most extreme voices rise. And so you have a very small percentage of people giving the impression that that's the public sentiment at large. And so I think that's part of what we're facing with this Saturn-Neptune, is this collective illusion that I think one of them might be that we're in such dire straits, honestly. It may not be that way. I think people tend to be much more moderate and reasonable, and that essentially we human beings want the same things for ourselves. I mean, we might have different ideas about what that looks like in terms of our systems, our education, our government, etc. But that was one of the things he looked at in doing research for this book, was when they do private polling, what people share and say is very different than when they do public polling. And when they do private polling, essentially we all care about healthcare. about taking care of our families. Like our values tend to be very similar. So yeah, that was just something I was sitting with this last week as part of what this is all about. And I also want to mention really quickly that even though, yes, we're going to be feeling these things, like Lisa said, especially come next spring, this is a long cycle. This is the beginning of a very long cycle. And so we're going to be feeling it, but it's going to continue to unravel and unfold. And I think a lot of that probably is around the remaking of systems, of the collective structures, of our shared reality, Saturn, And hopefully this transit allows us to access something more ideal, to pull some of that thread and become more visionary and perhaps like take that on the ground in some way that can be substantial, that can actually shape us and how we do things over time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we were planning to pull in here is that we don't just have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction happening, but at the same time, we also have Uranus and Pluto in a flowing aspect to this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And we also have a trine that's beginning to really get closer and closer between Uranus and Pluto. So we have this invitation to, it's not just that things are ending, but there's this invitation to recreate in a way that is far from what we already know, and being brave and being bold and digging deep. And one of the things that I continually tell people during this time is that we get to find our own autonomy. We get to come together and create the new paradigm for moving forward. And I don't know exactly what that process will look like, because humans ultimately aren't always great with this kind of change. And I think part of what we're seeing is the hysteria that can come out of the boundaries and the consistency being taken away. And my hope is that we come to terms with what is going away, and we realize that we're still going to exist on the other side. And I guess it's kind of what you're speaking to, Sarah, is what I was getting out of that to some degree, is that maybe the situation isn't as dire as we think it is. Maybe we're creating some sort of mass hysteria because the more extreme voices are rising to the surface. And hoping that we settle into this, and maybe more differing voices can be heard. And I just keep inviting people and encouraging them to find their own voice in the chaos, because everybody's independent voice is very important at this time.
That was in that book, that was one of his recommendations at the end of the book. Was he talked about how we do have more power than we think we have, and that power lies in a willingness to express authentically.
Yeah.
To not go to those places where we act out of places of expectation or because we think we're aligned with the people around us, but to really tune in, which is something that, I was listening to some astrologer talking about this really being the times that we should live from the inside out instead of
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely important in terms of how we express ourselves.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of it has to do, when we look at the conjunction, when we look at this very unique time, the Uranus into Gemini, first time in 84 years, Pluto into Aquarius, first time 250 years, thereabouts. Neptune into Aries, 163 years. Saturn into Aries, 29 years. All happening at the same time, as well as this asteroid comet. What's it? 3I. What's it called? It's named 3I Atlas. Coming by. And if you take a look at that new moon, on the 19th of December this year, I do believe that new moon will be at the galactic center, if I'm not mistaken. Let's have a look.
Ooh, tell
Yeah.
us more about that, Dulce, because that's not
Yeah,
think
it'll
about.
be at the galactic center, 27 degrees of Sag, at the same time that Three-Eye Atlas flies by. So there's a lot of stuff happening. These synchronistic moves with these very, very long timing sequences. I mean, these planets haven't been in these positions for decades, In Pluto's case, a couple of 100 years plus. So the synchronicity is, whoa, it's uncanny. And when we get that kind of synchronicity, as an astrologer, when you see these things, you like, whoa, you have to look at it. And so to make that useful to you personally, my suggestion is that you look at those planets in your natal chart. Where are they natally? And what is the natal energy from those placements? And how is that acting? And take that natal energy and see how it's coming through. So, for example, my Uranus is in Leo natally, and Uranus now in Gemini conjunct my moon, much more expressive in terms of writing. It's very simple, just more expressive in Uranus and Leo, expressiveness. And especially with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, what is the relationship, if any, between those two planets in your birth chart? And Edgar Cayce has quite a bit to say about the relationship between Saturn and Neptune. And there's another group, I think they're called I don't actually know how to pronounce the name of this organization, but they are informed by extraterrestrials. And they have a book called The 9 Freedoms about life on each of the planets. Now, you actually don't go live on Pluto, but you can live on the Pluto's subtle body. So in this book, The 9 Freedoms, it's about life on these planets in these subtle realms. And Edgar Cayce talks about the Saturn relationship with Neptune. And if there's a square, for example, between the two in the natal chart, then there's been some type of difficulty in the between line. So going in the between life, so Neptune will often represent what happens in between lives. So that's just my suggestion for anybody wanting to personalize this information. What is the natal position of the planets? How are they acting with one another? What houses and signs are they in? And then look to see those bursting into life currently. Yeah.
I have a trine between my Saturn in Leo and my Neptune in Sagittarius. So he would say about that in terms of the past life or the between life?
Between life.
The between life.
Yeah.
There would have been
soul
ease
would go
there.
to a different planet. Yes, right. Mm-hmm. So
do you have any relationship?
Ease and fire signs. So with these two coming together in a fire sign now, that actually is going to you have a grand fire trine, of course, not by degree, but by sign for you, Sarah. So this is sort of a fuel magnification of spirit Neptune, Saturn, Karma, Dharma, with these new beginnings. It would be almost like a pioneering role. I think if I would have your transits, I would look at it as being pioneering. That's what would come to me. Have you had any experience of that?
Well, my natal Mercury has been getting hit by Neptune for some time by opposition. So I'm in the Neptunian realm. Um, and I think when you use the word pioneering too, I just think about that on the mundane level, how that's what's happening right now collectively with that hitting the Aries point, this aspect. Um, yeah. And I also just that it's happening in the sign of Aries. There was a piece actually when you were speaking, Lisa, I was just thinking one of the turning points in my understanding of my own chart was with a teaching by Stephen Forrest, who was talking about, because I have a natal Aries moon, about that Aries is the sign that, of course, we think of it as associated with courage and bravery and all of these things. But he said it's not that people with Aries placements feel exuberant confidence and bravery. It's that they feel compelled to take the action to be in those places. And so I think there's something collectively we're all in right now where it's like we need to be brave. We need to be courageous in our building of something collective together.
Yes.
And expressing ourselves authentically and putting it out there. Yeah, we all need to participate in that work. And yes, my chart's dynamic, but also we have all of these outer planets in air and fire signs. And so there's that larger impulse too. Just it seems like it's a time, just very dynamic time in terms of taking action.
And it feels so different because for a while, like we had Neptune in Pisces. I mean, it's back there now for a little bit, but we still have this shift happening. But we've had Neptune was in Pisces for 14 years, and we had Pluto in Capricorn for a long time, and Uranus in Taurus. And Taurus, Pisces, and Capricorn are all very yin signs. So they're more receptive, they're more slow moving, they're not aggressive. So to have this shift for all of these outer planets to go into yang signs is, I think, just on its own, it's huge. I think we're seeing this collectively in a big way, just in the style of government that's stepping forward, where it's like, we don't want all of these policies that care about people and are much more yin. If you just take it from a very non-political, but just kind of black and white, they're taking on much more of the yang energy and saying, we're going to work for ourselves. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to expel what we don't want, where we've been in that opposite, more nurturing, more reflective place for quite some time. So I think that's part of why this is so drastically different and unsettling and really fits with the same thing that we've been speaking to, which is that thing you've been doing for a while, it's not happening anymore. We're doing something completely different. And we're going to do it fast. We're going to do it furiously. And hold on to your hats because there's no looking back.
Yeah, it's speeding up.
Yeah, it's fast.
What are some other ideas that came to both of you just in terms of looking at this planetary combination of Saturn-Neptune?
Well, I think for me, it's very definitely about surrendering the heavy burdens of our repeated karmic patterns. There's just no need for us to have these ridiculous, needless experiences of pain and suffering, death and starvation, bombing. It's absolutely bloody ridiculous to cry out bloody loud, Jesus. The hell. So it's the elevation, the Neptunian elevation, the rising up into this new space. We could even look at it dimensionally, moving beyond the fourth dimension of the mind and conflict and duality into the heart space of love, of the fifth dimension. Also, because this is off planet, this is transpersonal, and because we're having Uranus, particularly associated with AI, not so much AI, though that is part of it, but I think extraterrestrial life input from off-planet information coming in, angelic guidance, angelic support, cracking beyond the 5-6 senses of the Saturnian realm. I see it, I touch it, I taste it, I smell it. It must be real. No. There's a whole lot more. There's a whole lot more. So I think there's kind of a quickening and a relaxing of those Saturnian bounds. But those Saturnian bounds are hanging on for dear life. There's, the gender issue, the everything, the role a man must play, the role a woman must play. We've seen all that acting out in the political substrata of the United States. This is what we must do this way and kind of that. But all those boundaries are pricking, which of course is very threatening to a thinker that wants to hold things. This is the way it is. It's always been this way. It's terrifying to people who think like that. They, this is God's way. It must be this way. So it seems to me that the inner practice, feeling this part here, the inner flame, the Christ consciousness, Buddha's seed, that never goes out, The only thing that will transcend this mortal coil is that individuated spirit, which is part of the one. And that, to me, is what all of this is about. It's very, very spiritual. Probably because I've got late degrees Pisces rising. And so Pisces is very important energy for me. I have very personal experience of it. But that's my take.
I was listening to Pamela Gregory, and she was talking about Saturn-Neptune being compassionate leadership. And here you are with this aspect on your ascendant, speaking that, like being a voice for that. And you always have been, but I think it's even stronger in you. And hopefully it's reaching even further with that on your ascendant. But I also think, just listening to you talk, Dulce, there's these mysteries that we explore, the oracular arts, this symbolic language. This is all meant to pick up where science leaves off. There's a limit to what we humans know, that's Saturn. And then there's ways we try to push into the beyond and have some relationship with it and some understanding, and that's the mystery. And when I heard you speak, it's almost like this is a time where we're moving the lever a little bit, where our understanding of where that boundary was is now, it's moving. And I think it's moving even in the world of science as quantum physics continues to unfold and in such fascinating ways. I don't know if either of you are following some of the science that's going on in the quantum world, but it's really interesting because I think historically we've referred to extraterrestrials and alien life as something we've conceived it in very Saturnian ways as these bodies in these places. And I think that's getting busted open on the quantum level, where we're starting to realize that it's the spaces between, it's what's happening in the electromagnetic realm that is connecting us to that mystery and greater levels of intelligence and perhaps more visionary and sane and loving ways of being embodied, if any of that makes sense.
Absolutely. As you guys are talking, it just gave me such tenderness for Saturn and made me think about, we see Saturn as being all these things we have to do and all these limitations, but as Saturn's getting bored down on right now, it just makes me realize how hard this energy in human existence feels like it has to work in order to keep everything together with the long game in mind for our survival, for us to do all the things we need to do every day and proliferate life. And it's just made me realize how vulnerable Saturn really is. And it's almost part of I kept feeling this hardworking, staunch Saturn having to assert itself all the time. And it's like, this is why. because I'm really very vulnerable, because I can really fall apart at any time. But also that there's such wisdom in what's happening and in this discomfort that uh, all of the parts of us that depend on Saturn are going through. And I I agree with you, Dulce. I have a very strong relationship, like spiritual relationship to like other worldly beings, I guess I'd say. And I really sense that there is more of that coming in. And I don't I think like you said, Sarah, that we have this three-dimensional way, like Saturnian way of perceiving these other beings, but that those other beings are actually part of all of us. And even though as astrologers we work in time and space, I think the more you work in it, the more you realize that it's all an illusion, which is a kind of a very Saturn-Neptune statement, right? That yes, we have this structure that we live in, but also it's not real because our human perception is so limited. I feel like part of what's happening with this disintegration and this opening is us maybe being more sensitized to the subtleties that are all around us, the different dimensions, the different energies, the different frequencies. And we see a lot of this coming up through working with sound, vibration, with color, with light, which are all different means of communication and healing and existing that we can access, that I suspect, and I don't know if this is part of what you've been reading with the quantum research and that sort of thing, but Sarah, but that there's so much wisdom in some of these more simple gifts that we have, and that it might not even take a huge leap to get to where we're going. It might just take an exhale and an acceptance that we've always been there and it's always been accessible to us. So I guess from a more existential perspective, that Dulce, thank you for bringing us in there. But that's kind of my hope too, is that we get to expand and enliven our human experience that I think has always been our birthright. But because of these limited perspectives, we haven't been able to usher in our true power and our capabilities, which the idealist in me, which I think we all have this idealistic hope at this moment, which is perfect, is that the ultimate aim could be more peace, more equality, more caring for one another in a way where we're dismantling the perceptions of hierarchy that we've depended upon for so long.
I think you both were channeling it. You were channeling or Neptune. It was coming out loud and clear. It was beautiful. It reminded me of when I was homeschooling my boys and we were doing science, and there was a graph of the whole electromagnetic spectrum, and it showed the visible light waves, that take up this much, like Saturn's holding it in there. Like, this is all you get to know. And meanwhile, we know that there's so much more in either direction. So on that note, I think before we close off today, I would always like to share some medicine, and I would like both of you to share what you think is some medicine for these times. Listening to you speak, just thinking, trying to embody some of that Saturn-Neptune energy, I was at one point had the thought, like, we do need to tend to the body. When you were talking about Saturn being so vulnerable, like, okay, we can have all these thoughts. We can feel that stream of consciousness, that connection to the universal, but we are mere mortals for now. So I think at this time, whatever people can do in terms of healthy rituals, regimens, routines, rhythms to sustain this body that really can hold a lot, can hold a tremendous amount of insight and wisdom. And there's great capacity for regeneration. And there's something about the fact that this is all occurring in the sign of Aries that I think says something about that initial reorientation of identity and taking that on. So let us approach it all with beginner's mind and with fresh eyes. Yeah. That's how I'm seeing it. Dulce, tell me about your medicine.
Oh, well, I thank you for that, Sarah. That really comes home. I absolutely agree with you. Care for the body. Because if we are moving from Homo sapiens to Homo luminos, and if we are carrying more light as we transcend the fourth dimension, which is time, Saturn, that's when we transcend time, we move dimensionally. I find it useful to attune to the earth, to Gaia, to her rhythms and cycles, particularly to help me understand relationship, because this transit is on my ascendant. I'm working very closely with the moon cycle. Right now, tomorrow we'll enter the balsamic. Part of the moon cycle will be new on Tuesday. And so much of attuning to the lunar cycle means this, quote, for my humble, ordinary little life, that there is this, I'm embedded in this cycle. I'm held in this, and I can follow it through the phases, the waxing, the first quarter moon, and so on and so forth, and all the way around to where we are at this time. And then staying very, very close to what is arising, because the moon is the egg, the uterus, the mother. And that energy goes back to the original mother. It's our humanness, much like Saturn. It's our human DNA, our structures. So being particularly receptive to lunar wisdom, which is also our ancestral wisdom, and seeing what is it in all that we know. So much we don't know. We've forgotten Neptune. We've forgotten that we can feel emerge in us as new seeds at the new moon. So for me, being in the lunar cycle is very important. And that's the medicine I'd like to offer.
Beautiful. I guess the medicine that came up for me in this time is believe yourself. Believe that deep knowing inside of you and don't intellectualize it away. And I guess it has to do with embodiment, but it's almost just that thing that you know deep down, that voice that whispers and sometimes yells at you. Don't push it aside. Don't bring it into intellectual gymnastics. Just believe it. So
Yes, that's so true. Absolutely. That's a good one.
This has been so much fun to have a conversation with you. It's been so lovely, Dulce. Thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us today. Before we sign off, do you want to let people know how to find you?
Sure. I'm at dulcebellbulley.com, which is a hell of a mouthful. So you can go to Astrology by Dulce, Astrology by B.Y. Dulce, DULCE.com.
Perfect. And we'll put how to reach you in the show notes as well, so people can get a hold of you. And you do consultations and any other offering. You're a hypnotherapist.
Yes, a psychotherapist. So many people feel that they're poised. They've come to the edge of their known universe. They know that they're going, but there's so much fear about letting go of what they know. So the work that I'm mostly doing now is helping people prepare and do that step into that unknown. So I really like what you're saying about know yourself and tend to the body.
Great. Well, check out Dulce's work. I know I'm interested in diving deeper into what you're doing. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Such an amazing conversation. We're in a potent time, so don't let this opportunity pass you by. Listen and embody and take action where needed. So lots of love to everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
As always, thanks for listening to Broadcast Astrology, Insight for Humans. If you're so inclined, like, follow, and subscribe, and don't be a stranger.
Signing off for now. Until next time, humans, keep your gaze upwards on the stars and be well. We look forward to sharing more soon.